Uh, I'm having a great talk with Donald Foster. He is principal clarinetist of the Santa Barbara. Since when? What's it been? 10 years? 8, 9? What?
Ha ha. Just 19. I know.
That's before I was born. I can't believe it.
Yeah. I know. I was 8. I was 8 when I joined the orchestra. So
And Don Foster, if I can use your name Don once in a while here, Donald is so formal after all these interviews we've had, maybe two altogether. It is also, I mean, principal clarinetist Pasadena Symphony, your second clarinetist Los Angeles Opera Orchestra. How I envy you the operas of this season that you're going to be playing
yeah.
with Los Angeles Opera. Busy man, an adjunct professor at 2 community colleges. Am I doing okay so far? I'm not looking at my
Actually, I'm full professor at one college now,
Ah,
at Moreno Valley College. Yeah.
excellent.
Lucky enough to be on sabbatical this year, which is great.
Oh, nice. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
to work on this piece, in fact.
Okay. And Donald Foster is going to give the West Coast premiere of a new concerto that was recently premiered in Philadelphia. It is a concerto for clarinet by, help, I've just lost his name. Hang on, give me a second. How come I've done?
I
Leshnoff's clarinet concerto. What's his first name? Sorry, I've just lost it.
Jonathan.
Jonathan. Jonathan
Jonathan.
Leshnoff. I think we can get through this somehow. Jonathan Leshnoff, a new clarinet concerto, and this will be the West Coast premiere coming up with the Santa Barbara Symphony. The performances are this. I think I get this part right. This coming Saturday and Sunday. We're at about the 4th of February. So we are looking at Saturday evening, the 11th of February, Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, the 12th of February in the Granada Theater, the home of the Santa Barbara Symphony in Santa Barbara. This is a really very interesting program. Schubert, the Unfinished Symphony. It's taken me most of my life to begin to realize the importance, the significance of Franz Schubert as a composer. It's taken me
Yeah.
that. Yeah, because we've played it since we were, what, 12, the Unfinished in various arrangements. Uh, Aaron Copland's Third Symphony, which is very seldom heard. Nir Cabaretti told me the other night, because I love watching him conduct, that this one's very, very difficult for the orchestra, the Third
There.
Symphony,
Yes.
which is probably why it's not performed very often, huh? And then Leshnoff's Concerto Nekudim, I hope we're pronouncing the Hebrew properly, which translates loosely to points. We're going to talk about all of that. Tickets. Granada Theater box office in Santa Barbara for all of you in Southern California. And I do the usual spiel, and it's true. You come up, you hang out, you do a meal. There are a zillion gorgeous restaurants on State Street in Santa Barbara. You buy your tickets, and then you go and have a wonderful evening with the Santa Barbara Symphony at the Granada Theater. Tickets, box office, area code 805-899-2222, www.granadasb.org. $29 to $134. You can't hardly go wrong. There's going to be pre-talks, so if you really want to get a little more information on Schubert and Copland and Leshnoff, you're going to get that pre-talks before each of the 2 performances. Now let's get going. And here we go with a couple questions. Okay, you ready, Don?
I
Um,
am.
how long is it? Well, we asked that one, but just a little overview of the program we've looked at. We're talking really narrative pieces. We discussed it ever briefly before we taped. This idea that the Unfinished Symphony is Schubert speaking to us about his last days. It's very, very moving. The Eighth Symphony Unfinished at his death, very premature death. Aaron Copland, always full of this American spirit. The Third Symphony with its wonderful version of the Fanfare for the Common Man that ends the symphony is marvelous. And then there's Jonathan Leshnoff's Clarinet Concerto, and I had a chance to listen to a little bit of the premiere performance with the Philadelphia Orchestra. Who's the clarinetist this was written for?
Yeah, Ricardo Morales, who is one of the world's great clarinetists and certainly a treasure in American clarinet performance, and a fantastic person. And
Wonderful.
yeah,
All clarinetists are fantastic people. Even I'm a clarinetist. Somewhere in my life I was a clarinetist, and I'm a fantastic person. Anyway, this concerto I had a chance to, just to kind of listen to little bits and pieces, and it too is clearly some kind of narrative. It's the word melancholic came to mind. There's a wonderful second movement that's very rhythmic, very interesting, very exciting, but the piece ultimately has lots of meditation, at very least in it. Can you just give me an idea, as you've learned the concerto, how hard it has been to learn? What kind of ideas have flown through your mind in preparing this work?
right. Well, it's in a 3 movement structure. The first movement comes to a stop, and then there's a pause before the second movement. whereas the second movement goes right into the third movement. The third movement is very similar to the first movement. In fact, it's basically a bookend. And the large section, the meat of the piece is really the second movement. But you hit on something very important, and that is the sort of introspective feeling of the slow section is at times melancholic and other times just singing and beautiful. So you asked about the difficulty of the piece. Well, first of all, it's very rare to get to learn something completely brand new. So that is not lost on me, and the honor of being able to do a piece that, as a West Coast premiere, is massive, and then also to be able to do the second performance following Ricardo Morales is also incredibly a very big honor for me. But learning a piece brand new from scratch, I can't remember the last time I had to do that, specifically in a solo setting, and it's been wonderful. I've had the music since August and have been sort of living with it since then. And not unlike any piece I would be learning, even if it was chamber music or in an orchestral setting, it was slow practice and things like that. The most difficult thing for me about this piece is the necessity of endurance. It does not let up. There's very little resting, as it was for the clarinetist to just take a breath and just sit for a second and regain physical composure. And so that it's really been a test of learning the notes is difficult, whatever. But that's one thing. But then playing it from beginning to end really is the most difficult thing. That's where I find to be the most taxing, is because it's literally just tiring, but for all the right reasons.
By the way, how is it? This is you told me earlier in an email that this concerto has a huge orchestration, and we mentioned I understand kind of from a management point of view. Of course, the Copland has a huge orchestration, so therefore another piece. This worked beautifully, the concerto. But how is that? I didn't really have a chance to hear it in detail, the concerto. But are there moments where the orchestra is just overwhelming, or does it work out? Is Leshnoff a good composer?
Well, it works out. So it's scored with triple winds, so the woodwinds are in triples, and it utilizes a full brass section all the way down to tuba. There's even percussion and even piano and harp. And when I first saw that, I thought, wow, because there really aren't too many concertos that do that. The only other one that really comes to my mind is the Cortiliano Clarinet Concerto, which has antiphonal brass and the whole thing. But if you think about our warhorse concertos, Mozart, Weber, any of these things, they're very, very light orchestrations, maybe pairs of winds, but certainly not a full complement orchestra. So I'm also very excited about that. Just getting to share the stage with the entire orchestra will be great. But no, Leshnoff there's a reason his career is what it is. Because he knows the orchestra and knows these instruments and has really orchestrated this beautifully. I have to say, when I first saw it, I thought, well, this is interesting and ambitious. And then as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow, it works perfectly. There are moments, particularly in the woodwinds, in the second movement, where it's literally the clarinet is playing off with other instruments, and we're playing the same sort of licks, as it were. So I have a duet with the flute, and then I have a duet even with the other clarinet, which is unusual. Usually, the instrument that's soloed, usually it's vacant in the orchestra, and in this case, there are 3 clarinets that will be sitting on stage. So it's really exciting prospect.
And we hang on. Let's see, make sure I got the sound going here. We've been talking a little bit, or I've forced the issue about narrative. You've lived as you must. You've lived with this concerto for many months. You've learned it, you've worked it, you've thought about it. What do you think? Do you have any idea what kind of message is?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I've actually sort of really hunkered down over the last few weeks with really trying to get to just that, because as with anything, whenever you're the voice of a piece, you have to really. It doesn't matter if it's Brahms or Leshnoff. You have to really. It's a responsibility to communicate that correctly. And with Leshnoff's piece, he subtitles it Nekudum, which I had to finally learn and figure out what that meant. And it's a roughly translated, and this is from Jonathan's own communication to me. It roughly means points, the word points in Hebrew. And then the second movement, which I'm afraid I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's chesed, I think, it's sort of a word that basically it sort of connotes the idea of continual giving or an abundance of giving. And if you think of the second movement, with my mentioning of the endurance, it never lets up. So it's constantly giving. And it
Boy,
gives.
that's a cruel thing.
Well, all things sadly do come to an end, and but hopefully not until the last bar.
Yeah. So,
But the melancholy parts and the introspective parts of the first and the final movement, frankly, that is the most difficult to communicate because it is so plaintive. And it is repetitive, but I think on purpose. It's a da 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 da. It's a simple falling line that presents itself in many different forms, in many dynamics, with different sorts of foundations behind it. And sometimes not. Sometimes you're completely alone just with a simple string pad. And the dynamics, I mean, he writes incredibly specific dynamics in that section. Also, the word rubato appears a lot in the first and the final movements. Rubato, of course, meaning like borrowed time. And so it's up to the player to just sort of move at leisure. And again, that's Leshnoff trusting the player with this. Whereas the second movement is very rhythmic, and just by the sort of jigsaw nature of it, it has to kind of stay rigid.
yeah.
And it's a lot of fun.
And I've had a chance to have a little look at Leshnoff's bio, and this guy is a very, very accessible composer, very popular. The concerto is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And again, this composers aren't just noodling with notes; they're speaking messages to the
Right.
public, and that's why we're in this business, to try and figure out what those messages, what maybe those subtexts are about. And this is certainly a beautiful, beautiful concerto. I think the public's going to love it. Don't you?
I hope.
Yeah,
I
I
do.
think so.
I
Because,
think, and also on that note, I think this concerto is going to have a long life. I think that this will become standard repertoire, and it's accessible. I have a feeling that this is not a piece that will age out. You know what I'm saying? It's going to
yeah.
sort of stay with us, and I'm excited to do it and continue to do it and learn it.
Now about staying power, we're trailing down here. We're getting to the end of this. I just want to ask you about what else is on the program. Just a little bit. Schubert Unfinished Symphony. I myself have played clarinet on that symphony since I was like in high school. I got so over it, and now in my old age, I'm beginning to realize what a masterpiece it is. Where do you see?
Well, I have to tell you, when I obviously they had booked the concerto because this is a co-commission, and we figured out a date and all that stuff. I had no idea what else was going to be on the program. And when I found out that it was the Schubert and the Copland 3, I was so disappointed for me, selfishly, because of course I'm not playing in the orchestra. And those are two of my all time. I never ever get tired of the Schubert. In fact, I don't get tired of any Schubert, frankly. But you're right. When you're younger, it is it's a little over our heads, I think.
Yeah.
And in fact, my one of my mentors, Mitchell Lurie, the great clarinetist and educator.
Whom I studied with briefly before he said, "Go be a conductor."
There's a few clarinet pieces that are involve. Sorry, there's a few Schubert pieces that involve the clarinet apart from the symphonies, chamber music pieces, Shepherd on the Rock, things like that. And he used to say that they should hand out Schubert licenses the way they hand out driver's license. Like you have to be a certain age to be able to play Schubert, because it's true. It's so it's bipolar in a way, as he was very, very, troubled, this person. So, but the unfinished is just fantastic. The orchestra is going to sound great. And then the Copeland you mentioned, it is hardly done. It is very difficult. It's also a massive orchestra, and so, but it's a spectacular piece. Everyone will know the Fanfare for the Common Man, which of course is the quintessential beginning of the last movement. But almost every moment of that piece is pretty magical.
Okay, give me a second here. Well, I think we're just about done. I'm going to kind of run us through this. You know what disappoints me is I need you to tell me the first name. It's Jonathan Leshnoff. Thank you. Boy, oh boy. See, it's all right off the cuff, everybody, in case you wondered. Let's just review the information, because this really is quite an interesting concert. The Leshnoff, beautiful, accessible, very complex and very interesting, and very, very much a narrative clarinet concerto, new piece, premiered in Philadelphia. We're going to get the West Coast premiere with Donald Foster playing clarinet with the Santa Barbara Symphony this weekend. The Aaron Copland Symphony, that is just a huge blast too. I have never heard it live. I've never been in a concert hall, and I can't wait. I can't wait to experience the Copland's Third Symphony, and then Schubert, this master. And speaking of a master of wind writing, that's what I've really come to appreciate. Beautiful, beautiful wind writing. Here we go. Santa Barbara Symphony Orchestra. For us here on about the 4th of February, this coming Saturday, February 11th at 8 p.m. in the Granada Theater in Santa Barbara, and Sunday at 3 p.m., that's February the 12th in the Granada Theater. Granada Theater ticket box office, you can call, you can do internet, www.granadasb.org. It's very simple to get tickets these days. Cheap, $29 to $134 if you want to go totally fancy. The box office number you can call from throughout Southern California. Area code in Santa Barbara is 805. Telephone number is 899-2222. Jonathan Leshnoff, West Coast premiere of a really beautiful and very thoughtful clarinet concerto. It's a very, very interesting experience for the public. Schubert unfinished, so that we can, consider our souls with him. I mean, that's how profound Schubert is. And then Copland's glorious, magnificent, all-American, if you will, Third Symphony. Nir Cabaretti is going to be conducting. I can't wait to watch him conduct the Third Symphony of Copland. Don, have I messed up enough? Are we done?
It's fantastic, and I really hope you enjoy the piece. And again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks for giving me some of your time as well. Thanks.